Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be back here in Kingston with our fantastic candidate, Mary Rita Holland, for the riding of Kingston and the Islands, to talk about yet another expense that the NDP can take off of your shoulders. We will cover your prescription drugs, your medicine. It's universal pharmacare is what we call it, but what it means is that your prescription drugs can be paid for with your OHIP card instead of having to reach into your pocket and pay through your wallet. This will make such a difference in people's lives. We know that there are people who are not able to afford their prescriptions. I was just talking to a doctor seconds ago who said he knows that when he prescribes pills or drugs for his patients to ensure that they have the prescriptions they need or the medicines they need to keep them well, there are people who will walk out of his office and not be able to fill that prescription, tuck that prescription in their pocket, and know that they're never going to be able to get what they need at the pharmacy. So we can fix that by putting together a drug program that covers everyone. And we know that will not only make people well or help them to stay well, but it'll also take pressure off of other parts of our healthcare system. This is something, as Mary Rita said, that other governments have refused to do. The current government has made cuts, of course, hurting people, making things worse. But I'm excited to say that a new Democrat government will coverage program, and it'll save families hundreds of dollars. I was just, again, talking to somebody else who described the fact that after being covered at work for their entire life, when you retire, you don't have any benefits anymore. And so people really have to do the math and do a lot of legwork to figure out how are they going to be able to pay for their prescription drugs. For some families, that means taking a private insurance coverage that costs hundreds of dollars a month. So think of a family that's paying $250 a month, for example, out of their pocket for drug coverage with these private insurance companies. That's a heck of a lot of money if all of those prescriptions are paid for through this OHIP process, through a universal pharmacare plan. And it means that they don't need to pay that money out of pocket for their coverage. Their coverage will come through their OHIP card. You know, I've talked to people who, other doctors who have told me that they know that they have patients who, because they can't afford to fill their prescriptions every month, they'll skip every other day. So they'll take their pill one day, skip the next, take the next, skip the next. And that doctor that I was talking to about this said to me he knows for certain that patient is going to end up in an emerge because they're not managing their condition in the way that was prescribed. So we can do better for people. And I'm excited to say that this plan is something that we will implement immediately upon forming government in a couple of weeks' time and provide that, not only that relief, but that security that you can get the prescriptions that you need, that you don't have to ever worry about trying to figure out what you can cut, especially with expenses where they are now. Everything is so unaffordable. But people are having to make decisions around what to cut back on the grocery list so that they can make sure they can still afford their kids' prescriptions for the month. We can do so much better for people, save them lots of money, take away the stress of trying to figure out after retirement how you're going to pay for the bills. Make sure that people are getting the kinds of prescriptions that they need to stay well. But there's something that has to happen before we can make all of that happen. And that is, you have to vote NDP. The polls are open, the advance polls are open. I'm urging folks, let's get to those ballot boxes. Let's mark your check mark beside an NDP person on the ballot. In this riding, it's Mary Rita Holland. And let's finally come together and form a government that is going to take care of the things that matter most for you, that are going to fix the things that have been broken and make your life less expensive, make life more affordable, which is what everybody is indicating, and I hear it all the time, is top of mind for folks. We can take some of the pressure off your back with programs like our prescription drug coverage program, our universal pharmacare program. The NDP will have you covered in a couple of weeks' time. So get out there into the polls. Instead of a premier that works for his buddies, this time, let's have a premier that works for you. I'll take any questions that folks might have.
So we'll start with on-site questions. We'll ask media to carefully make their way to the microphone. It'll be one question, one follow-up, starting with media traveling on the bus. First question comes from Andy Takagi from Queen's Park Briefing.
Morning.
Hi, Andy.
So polls have consistently had the NDP in third behind the Liberals. Your math of 10 more seats and then you can form government, that would put you in minority territory, requiring you to work with most likely the Liberals unless the Greens make an insane gain. What does that say about your strategy, that you're getting more for a minority government than a majority?
Oh, not at all. I'm running for premier and I'm running to have a majority government because people need to have hope that the things that matter most to them can actually be fixed. And that's what this campaign is all about. It's about saying to folks, you don't have to keep going back between liberals and conservatives. Liberals that disappoint you, they talk a good game and then they get elected and they don't follow through. They sell off Hydro One. They bring us hallway medicine. They bring us the gas plant scandal. But everybody knows, all of us know, all of us who believe that life needs to be more affordable so that everyday folks can afford an everyday life here. All of us that know that a universal pharmacare plan the most expensive bills that they have every single month. Buy their first home. You can only do that by getting rid of Doug Ford. Defeating Doug Ford is job number one. And what I'm asking folks is that all of those things that we agree need to be fixed and can be fixed, the way to fix them this time is with a vote for the NDP. We are in the best position to defeat Doug Ford, and that's what I'm asking voters to do this time.
So the Ford government has been going aggressively for some of the traditional base of the NDP. They secured their 5th union endorsement. They're going after ridings in Windsor and Brampton that have traditionally gone NDP. Does that say something about the strategy here, that saying that every time you attack him, Doug Ford smiles? Should there have been a more unified progressive strategy against
Duca wants to run away from the 7 seats in the legislature. So I get it. I get why he wants to pretend that never happened. But it did happen. There's a reason why the Liberals didn't even have party status. But this is about not having to go back to that same strategy that ends up with a government that disappoints. Absolutely. Job number one for all of us who believe in the things that I've been talking about this morning and all throughout this campaign. Job number one for all of us is to defeat Doug Ford. What I'm saying to people is, you don't have to go back to a disappointment. You can have a premier that does what she says she's going to do. And when it comes to Doug Ford, look, that guy is not a friend of working people. He likes to pretend he's a friend of working people, but he certainly is not. I'm proud to always have stood with working people from before I was ever even elected until this moment in time. Before elections, during elections, and after elections, I stand with the working people of this province. They're the ones who, they're the ones who make sure our province runs and operates and works for all of us. And so there's just no doubt that when you're talking about working people writ large, the NDP will always be by their sides. So whether it's the 1 million workers that are represented by the Ontario Federation of Labour, which has endorsed us, whether it's OPSU, whether it's steelworkers, other unions, working people know that when a premier gets elected and cuts the minimum wage, pulling $6,000 out of the pockets of minimum wage workers, that's not a friend to working people. When a premier refuses during a global pandemic to provide the basic necessity of paid sick days for working people so that they don't have to go to work and expose their co-workers to COVID-19, that is not a premier who supports working people. When you have a premier that brings into the province legislation that caps workers' wages at a 1% increase annually, when inflation is driving at about 5 or 6% right now, meaning their wages are being cut each and every paycheck, those wage caps do not indicate a premier who's in it for working people, who's a friend of working people, who's who's prepared to be supportive of the workers of this province. And so I would just say that no matter what Doug Ford claims, and no matter what game he's playing now, at the end of the day, we know whose side Doug Ford is on. We know his cuts hurt people, and we know he is not a friend of working people. Hasn't been, won't be, pretending to be now maybe, but that's not who Doug Ford is.
Next question comes from Chris Rashowi from the Toronto Star.
Hi, Chris.
Hi there. Just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you feel your chances are in Eastern Ontario, particularly here in Kingston, where it has been Liberal up until the last election.
Oh, we're absolutely thrilled with Mary Rita Holland as our candidate. There is just no doubt that she's not only been a fantastic city councillor here, so the people of Kingston know her well. She's also been very active with our party and has served as our president for many years. I'm confident that Mary Rita Holland will become the MPP for Kingston and the Islands, but not only that, she'll go to Queen's Park each and every day and work for the people of Kingston and the Islands, always focusing on the things that matter most to them and making sure that they can have a more affordable life, more access to housing. Here, there's a big issue around access to doctors, but there's just no doubt that Mary Rita is going to be a fantastic government MPP.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask about some homophobic writings that have surfaced with regards to the Brantford Brant PC candidate. He's now saying he's the proud father of a daughter who's LGBT. I mean, does that excuse it, or should he still be fired?
It doesn't excuse anything. Anytime people are writing or expressing homophobic beliefs, it is hurtful and painful to LGBTQ2SI plus people. And it can't be tolerated. It is unexcusable, and it should never be happening. And my heart goes out to the pain that these kinds of things cause young people. And I want to say to young people, you are who you are, and love is love, and we're all equal people. And you have the support of the vast majority of people in our province. There are some who espouse these hateful beliefs. Just know that you are loved, that you're special, that you're respected, and that you belong. And we will always be with you. And I'm really sorry that yet again these painful things are being expressed, and it's causing you pain and harm.
Next question comes from Man Al-Hamidi from the Canadian Press.
Good morning. Hi, how are you? Before the election, you introduced our London Family Act to address Islamophobia and other sorts of hate in Ontario, but that act didn't pass because the Ford government didn't support it. Will you commit to reintroducing this act if you're elected, and what specifically you would do to address the issue of hate in the province, and do you think this issue is a priority on voters' minds right now?
I think that anybody who has experienced any kind of racism or hateful attack based on race or faith or any other part of who they are, of course, is concerned about these issues. I am proud to have been able to work with the National Council of Canadian Muslims to put into legislation the kinds of measures that will help us fight the hatred, the Islamophobia. And I was just at ISNA Canada very recently, and once again made the public commitment that we will absolutely pass the Our London Family Act, but just as importantly, we will also then do the things that are in that piece of legislation to start tackling the hatred that exists, the Islamophobic hatred, but as you mentioned, the hatred that exists against all kinds of folks, whether that's anti-Semitism, anti-Black racism, anti-indigeneity, anti-Asian racism. I mean, there's just too much hate out there, and we have an obligation and a responsibility, leaders do, to take that on and to listen when community says, we don't want to just hear the words. We want you to take action. That's what our London Family Act is, and it was extremely disappointing that the only party in the legislature that wasn't prepared to move that legislation forward was the governing party, Doug Ford and the Conservatives. It was disappointing, and I think it was disrespectful. We have to start really tackling these pieces. So there's a lot of stuff in the legislation. I can certainly detail some of it if you want me to, but what we know for sure is that we can together, we can tackle all of this hate and start turning things around for Canadian, or for Ontarians rather.
Thank you. On another topic, Mr. Del Duca said this morning, quote, actually before the quote, he's described your party's publishing of your research on his candidates as, quote, desperate tactic that would help Doug Ford win the election. What's your reaction to that?
Well, here's what I have to say about that. No leader should ever condone fraudulent election tactics. I mean, how can you trust somebody to be the premier of the province if you can't trust them to follow the rules when it comes to the nomination of candidates? Fraudulent activity when it comes to elections is not tolerable, period. And I don't care whether this is something that Stephen Del Duca thinks is an attack against him. He has to step up and take responsibility for these things. You can't just hide this stuff under a rug and pretend it's not happening. People deserve to know the character of the people that they're electing, or that they're looking towards as possible leaders. I guess my only other point on this is that Ontarians deserve better than that. Ontarians deserve better than that, and I'll just leave it at that.
Next question comes from Joanne Chianello from CBC.
Hi, Joanne.
Hi, Ms. Horwath. Ms. Horwath, last time you were in Ottawa in the 2018 election, you joked that the eastern flank was the MPP from Oshawa, right? That's no longer the case. You have an MPP here in Kingston and the Islands, Ottawa Centre, very close in Ottawa West Nepean, where I know you're going later today. Can you talk about how those ridings, those races are important to you and your path to Queen's Park?
Thanks very much for the question. I think the best way to describe it for me is having a chance to connect with people in Eastern Ontario like we haven't been able to do in years gone by. And certainly with Jennifer French, and then with Ian Arthur, and now Mary Rita Holland, and with Joel Hardin, hopefully Chandra Pasma, as you're talking about. We are showing the people of Eastern Ontario that when we talk about a party and a premier that is going to go to Queen's Park and work for you each and every day and try to fix the things that the other parties have broken, that includes all of Ontario. So that includes Central Ontario and Southwestern Ontario and Northern Ontario, which I'm heading to tomorrow, or whether it's Eastern Ontario. We all know that there are many things that have been broken for a long time, and I'm really proud of folks like Mary Rita and our other candidates, but we're all Ontarians, and we all share a lot of concerns about where we're headed with the affordability crisis that we have, with young people giving up their dreams of ever being able to own their own home, with transit systems that need a lot of support, with the cost of everyday things like auto insurance and prescription drugs and dental care and mental health care. Whether you live in Eastern Ontario whether you live in the GTA, whether you live in the Niagara region, whether you live in northwestern Ontario. These concerns are common for all of us, and I think the most important thing is for people to have hope that you can finally actually have a party and a premier that's there for you and to fix the things that matter to you.
And just to follow up on that theme, in those three ridings I mentioned, it does seem like the Liberals and the NDP are fighting each other as opposed to the Progressive Conservatives. Is that a problem?
I think that this time people need to know that the party that's in the best shape to defeat Doug Ford is the NDP. I know folks have had that struggle in the past, but this time the NDP has not only an amazingly strong team, we have a number, almost 40 people that have legislative experience because we were the official opposition. Mr. Del Duca's team didn't even have party status, only 7 MPPs. So if you're thinking about how do we come together to defeat Doug Ford this time, how do we come together to start to fix many of the things that we all agree need to be fixed, this time your best shot is the NDP.
Next question comes from Kimberly Johnston from CTV.
Hi, Kimberly.
Hi. Doug Ford is campaigning on your home turf this morning and meeting with Stelco workers. How does that make you feel?
You know what? I'm traveling around the province, talking to folks in all ridings as well. I think that the working people, the good people of Hamilton, know very well that New Democrats go to Queen's Park and fight for them each and every day, and never forget who it is that we're fighting for and why we're fighting for them. And you know, I'm going to keep doing that as a Hamiltonian, as are my candidates. Monique Taylor on Hamilton Mountain, Sandy Shaw on Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas. We have a great candidate in Hamilton East, Stony Creek, Zagam Butt. And we have a fantastic candidate in Flamborough, Glanbrook, Alison Sillis. Hamiltonians know that New Democrats have their backs and that we are always going to fight for them. And we understand who they are. I understand who they are. And I'm going to keep fighting for them, as are my candidates. And we're also going to fight for all of Ontario. We're going to fight for Ontarians in every single riding from one end of this province to the other.
Are this morning's update events and trade union endorsements of the PCs a sign that NDP has lost touch with a big segment of workers?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. The working people of this province know who it is that always stands with them. And you know, the most important thing is, as a leader, I also know who I stand for and who I stand with. And that'll never change for me. I've always stood with working people. I stand with working people now. So before elections, during elections, after elections. And as I said earlier, Mr. Ford likes to pretend that he's in it for the working person. It's not true. If you're in it for the working person, you're providing paid sick days so that they don't have to go to work sick or else lose pay and not be able to cover the rent. You know, a premier isn't for working people if you're depressing or compressing their wages and not allowing them to earn enough money to pay the bills in an ever a more expensive environment, as affordability continues to be a problem. You know, you're not in it for a working person if you're not acknowledging that you know, that the things that are very expensive for them can be fixed with a government you know, that has a plan to do that. And we know that conservative cuts are the opposite of that. Conservative cuts hurt families, they hurt workers, they hurt people, and that's the reality. So this time around, we know that we've got a lot of new endorsements. OPSU, for the very first time in history, I think, has endorsed the NDP, the Ontario Federation of Labour, with 1 million folks that are represented by the unions that are affiliated to the OFL. These folks know, and they always have, that the NDP is in it for working people.
We'll move to questions on Zoom. First question comes from Richard Southern from City News.
Hey, Richard.
Hi, Ms. Horwath. Just a quick one from me on the mandate letters that Mr. Ford has gone to court to keep hidden. I asked Mr. Ford yesterday if he would commit to releasing new mandate letters should he be reelected, and he wouldn't. Wondering your thoughts on that. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting to hear the Premier on one side of his mouth talk about transparency and his talking points. I think they were in his binder the other night at the debate. But he talks about transparency, and then the fundamental things that would demonstrate transparency are nowhere to be found when it comes to Doug Ford. So it's disappointing for Ontarians that they have had a Premier for the last 4 years that refused to be upfront about what their plans were and how they were going to handle the province of Ontario. But this is something that we knew was going to happen during the last campaign, when they didn't even have a platform, when Doug Ford refused to tell us where he was going to cut. And then, of course, he got elected, and boy, did he start cutting. He started cutting right away in healthcare, in long-term care. He cut in education. He's still cutting in education as our kids need more supports after COVID or coming through COVID, not less. Who does that? Who gets elected as the Premier of the province and starts cutting cancer screening programs, cutting autism services, doubling the wait list for children who are needing autism services, creating chaos for their families? Who cuts education during a pandemic? These are the things that Doug Ford doesn't want people to know are part of his agenda. But we all know that conservative cuts hurt people. They hurt families, they hurt working people, they hurt seniors, they hurt kids, people with disabilities, they hurt kids with autism, they hurt cancer patients. Ontario deserves so much better than that. The people of this province deserve a lot better than that.
All right, that's it for me. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Richard.
Next question comes from Colin DeMello from Global News.
Hey, Colin.
Hey, good morning, Ms. Horwath. I'm wondering, realistically speaking, on June 2nd, is a majority NDP government still a realistic achievement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're going for a government so that we can actually fix the things that matter most to people. I'm not offering the moon and the stars, but what I'm saying to people is I'm listening to you. We've seen what COVID has shown us is broken, and those things have been broken for a long time. Let's get together this time and form a government that actually fixes the things that are broken, that gets to work right away to fix the things that are broken in a responsible way, in a way that makes your life more affordable, but make sure that you have the health care that you need, that seniors are treated with dignity and respect, have the home care supports that they need and want so that they can stay at home longer and get the services coming in, fix the broken long-term care system, get the profits out of both of those things and bring the care back in, hire thousands and thousands of more nurses and PSWs, make sure that our backlogs in our hospitals are dealt with so that wait lists can start reducing, or wait times can start reducing. You know, in some ways, these are the fundamentals. They're the fundamentals that were broken, frankly, broken. Hallway medicine, I'm thinking of particularly, long-term care particularly, children's mental health services particularly, by a government that for 15 years didn't address those things. But now, the last 4 years have become even worse. Doug Ford has made things even worse. Now's the time, and I think COVID has shown us. Now is the time we have to take these things seriously, and we can. And that's the great news. The great news is that we can fix these things. You can have hope that these things can be fixed and that we can have the kind of Ontario that we can all be proud of.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if you can help me understand something. So the last 4 years seem to have been very topsy-turvy, and one would have thought that the benefactor of all of those who were disillusioned with Doug Ford would have been the Ontario NDP. Yet we're not seeing a galvanizing support, coalescing behind you or the NDP. Why is that? Why do you think the NDP has seemingly not been able to capitalize on all of the dissatisfaction with Doug Ford?
Well, you know what, Colin, I know that there's all kinds of polls that have been bouncing around. The most important thing is that people know that there's hope, that there's hope that we can fix the things that are broken. And we are going to keep assuring people that that's the case, that they don't have to keep bouncing back and forth between Conservatives and Liberals and see all of these things never change. That's what's happened for far too long. And so there's a couple of weeks left to this election campaign, and we're going to be working really hard to let folks know that they can change it up this time, and that's what we're offering. I can also just, since you were talking about the actual voting, the voting starts now. Voting starts now. The polls, the advanced polls are open, and I just want to encourage folks to get out there to the ballot box as soon as possible and vote for hope. Vote for hope for the future.
Seeing no further questions, I'll turn it back to you, Andrea.
Thanks, everyone. It's really sunny and great, but boy, it's a little bit cool in the shadow, so I hope everybody's staying warm, and thanks for being here this morning. I'm looking forward to spending some time here, but also then heading to Ottawa and really chatting with folks around the province about how do we fix all of the things that matter most to people. Thanks, everybody. And my rock.
Record.